So we have an action-packed show today, so I'm not going to belay the fact. We want to get right into it. We've got Dan McGraw here from Gill Brothers. We've been doing a series on end of life, from trying to stay living in your home to going into an assisted living situation. We've had end of life, dying in the discussion about that, and now we're going to talk about really what amounts to the final stage, and that is the final resting place, and that is the funeral service and those kinds of things. We're going to talk about some things today, just to warn you, might be a little uncomfortable for people, and because
it's uncomfortable for a lot of people.
For a lot of people, just because they don't want to think about it.
Right.
And it doesn't need to be that way. I mean, now we refer to them a lot of times as celebration of success, and so we're going to get into that.
Celebration of life.
But I want to start with Gill Brothers, because we have some history with Gill Brothers and some connections that we'll talk about in a minute. Dan, thanks for coming in. Welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
Give us a little history just on, if you could, and maybe you don't know. If you don't know, then I'm going to tease you about it. But just a little bit about the history of burial services in general. Just kind of where did that all come from? And I mean, we all have this imagery of the West, Wild Wild West, where the coffins are standing up on the side. You see the pictures, and then the undertaker is always this tall, skinny guy with a tall hat on that looks like death himself, and he's selling the boxes.
Well, historically, mostly in the United States, funeral service was it was done by the family, done by friends. It was done by clergy as we know it today.
Okay.
The primary purpose of the undertaker was transportation and a burial box.
Oh, okay.
So, as an example, when Abraham Lincoln died, there was no funeral home involved in his burial. His embalming was done by surgeons in Washington at the time.
Okay.
And somebody provided a casket, and that was it. So history in America changed when Abraham Lincoln died, because when he was taken from death and the train ride back to Illinois, his body was embalmed and people were viewing his remains.
Mm-hmm.
During during the Civil War, this is where embalming became very prevalent in our country, because they were able to take the soldiers that died on the battlefield, have their remains embalmed, and then transported by rail back to their home state.
Right.
So there's many cemeteries in the Twin Cities area and the state that have Civil War veterans. And coincidentally, my great-grandfather, Michael Gill, was one of those people that got into the business of building caskets and providing transportation.
So he's a carpenter by trade.
Sort of.
Okay.
He was called a cooper.
Okay.
A cooper is one who makes wooden barrels.
Okay.
And he worked for Pillsbury Flour Company.
Okay.
Which was the world's largest flour miller.
Right.
Based right on the banks of the Mississippi. Mm-hmm. And when Pillsbury went to a muslin sack, he was out of a job, started the M.J. Gill Undertaking Company, primarily building caskets and providing transportation. So if there's any visitation, it was held at a house. Can you come back tomorrow and take Mom, Dad, Grandma, Grandpa to church? And then, you may as well take them to the cemetery.
So that's the TV shows that we watch where they have the casket in the
parlor.
In the parlor,
right.
in the house.
In the big house.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
Yes, the parlor.
Yes.
Is that still done today?
Yes, there's nothing illegal about it. I don't think we've had what we call a home visitation.
That's what I want.
I would say it's been a couple of years.
Okay.
I mean, if someone came to me and said, we want this, I'd make it happen.
Sure.
The neighbors often would freak out.
Would they?
Kind of. People are afraid of death.
Okay.
Nobody likes it.
They really are. It's really too bad.
It's statistically, I'm not a math wizard, but nobody here is going to make it out.
Yeah,
alive.
Right.
Statistically, it's 100%.
Right.
You're gonna
Certainty.
Die. Right.
Yeah,
yes.
just win.
As a matter of fact, in Greek mythology, one of the worst curses that could be bestowed upon you is that you would live forever.
Mm.
Well, I could see where that would be an issue for some people.
Yeah.
So Sheila wants to have a tent in the backyard and then have a band, a marching band, and all that stuff. And because you see the ones in like other countries where they're walking down the street.
Yes.
You're going to walk down my street.
Yeah,
you're going to walk down our
music
street.
Nothing illegal about that. You might need a parade permit.
Maybe.
I have a question,
Okay.
and you're probably
I do subscribe. If we don't laugh, we will cry.
Yeah,
right, exactly. So back in the day, when I was young, you went to a funeral and you saw the people in the casket, and that's like my processing, right? That's how I process. That's how I remember. But I, to this day, do not know anybody else that was sent the professional pictures of the people in the casket. So my two uncles died in a farm accident. So it was a month or so later, and my mom in the mail gets these professional wallet-sized pictures of them in the casket. And
keep in mind it was Iowa.
Well,
yeah, I get it, but isn't it weird? Because I still remember those pictures so vividly. I mean, I was 14. We went to the funeral, but it was when they came in the mail after that's what I remember.
I have received mailing about people that solicit their services of being professional funeral photographers.
Okay.
Not just to capture the deceased,
right?
If that deceased is even present in a casket today. 70% of our loved ones are cremated, and they don't have any formal viewing of the body. But aside when my grandmother May Gill died in 1991, I had thought people that took pictures of their loved ones at funerals was just plain old weird.
Yeah.
And so when my grandma passed, it was in the May of the year, and I was there with my family, my mom, dad, cousins. Everybody's dressed up.
Uh-huh.
Somebody was taking pictures, and I thought, that's creepy. They're pictures I treasure today.
Yes, because you can see everyone who was there.
It's not so much grandma dead in the casket.
Yeah.
But everyone's dressed up.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Now, albeit funeral services changed a lot, not everybody dresses up anymore.
Yeah.
But at least people still make an effort to look better than they just rolled out of bed.
Right,
yes,
right.
Yes.
Well, it's a sign of respect for the deceased and for the family.
Yes.
And let's think about it. As life goes on, I mean, so many family members, 12 aunts and uncles on each side, they each had 8 kids. The only time we saw each other was funerals and weddings.
Right.
And so
wakes,
treasure those
weddings,
pictures,
and
right?
Yeah.
Because that's when everybody was together. Mm-hmm.
So you wanted to look good so that they remembered you not being a bum.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, we're going to head out to break. When we come back, I want to talk about the difference. We alluded to it with the lovely and talented Sheila's request for the tent and the parade.
Yes, right.
But the different service options and opportunities that people have today that may have been different from when you first started doing this, or obviously from when your grandfather started the business. What are the options? It seems like it's just a very broad scope of things available now that were not available to Keith Henry Hittner Sr. From Winona, Minnesota in 1953. So
you better hire an event planner when I go. That's all I got to say.
Can't you say Winona properly? Winona, yeah.
Winona, yeah. Okay.
North Dakota over here. So
this is Our Healthy Homes, ourhealthyhomes.com, ourhealthyhomes.com, 651-775-9194. Give Sheila a ring-a-ling-a-ling.
Yep.
She'd be happy to steer you in the right direction so you don't wind up in a box anytime soon. Dan from McGraw Dan McGraw from Gill Brothers is here with us, and we'll be right back after these messages talking about service options, celebrations, and unique and meaningful events, which is... Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. This is Our Healthy Homes, ourhealthyhomes.com. We're in the studio with Dan McGraw from Gill Brothers Funeral Service and Cremation services. Okay. 70% of everyone.
You a little
that
nervous
kicks the
about
bucket. Oh, I'm
the
a little
topic?
bit nervous, but I'm thinking, ooh, it's closer than I think. I've never been this close to the end. So before we went out to break, I said I want to talk about service options and celebrations because that has changed so much.
Maybe that's what I should get into.
And it's kind of like, it's almost like the, I don't want to say that. I wanted to say like the reverence of it has kind of gone away maybe a little bit.
I would tend to agree.
Would you? Okay.
Yes.
Because now it seems to me, and this is how I would want it, I want to have a barbecue. That's what I want. You know, when I kick the bucket, you know, give me a barbecue and have some fun and you know, everyone can talk about what a turd I was, but it's better than weeping and sobbing and all of that stuff, which is what you seem to remember to. What kind of options do you have, or have you been? What's the most weird thing?
Oh, this is good.
Oh,
Bizarre.
oftentimes the weird stuff, the funeral home isn't involved.
Okay.
In today, I said just locally here, 70% of the people are cremated. COVID changed a lot of
Oh,
things
sure.
with people. I will say people are back to having memorial services, remembrance services,
Yeah.
celebration of lives,
Mhm.
barbecues. One of my best friends died during that COVID period, and he died, my opinion, relatively young, 61.
Yeah,
That's
very
young. Ouch.
And it was COVID, and we had a tailgate party.
Yeah.
Hey, there
You
you
know,
go.
we wanted the outside environment, and we had ice cream sandwiches. We had barbecue of, you know, hot dogs, hamburgers. Yes, there was alcohol served. It was in the parking lot at our funeral home in Bloomington,
Mm-hmm.
and about 300 people showed up on a
Wonderful.
cold, windy day in
Mhm.
October.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a unique, not as fun as a parade, but it was different. And we had a special prayer card or holy card
Mm.
made up that was like a sports ticket,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Oh, yeah.
And
Cute.
it was to a celebration of life tailgate party, and it had time, and it was unique and different. So, but we were involved in that. But oftentimes, memorial services today are held at Legion clubs, the picnic shelters,
Mm-hmm.
the country club, the cabin, sometimes people's houses. And a lot of the faith aspect is starting to go away. People are spiritual but not religious, which sometimes is genuine, and sometimes it means, I don't belong to a church anymore.
Right.
And there's a person who runs, it's called NC Little Hospice, Bob Solheim, and he started that, I think, about 30 years ago. And he said when people came to his hospice 30 years ago, when people came in and they needed a chaplain, 90% of the people belonged to a church.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's just about opposite today.
Wow.
Where their last faith connection is with a hospice chaplain.
Mm-hmm.
It's not their regular minister or priest or rabbi or imam or whatever your faith is.
Isn't that interesting? Because you have, I mean, it's so interesting to think about that because you've got these mega churches around,
Mhm.
you know, with 10,000 members, and so the imagery is, well, everyone must belong to a church. You got these mammoth churches around, but they're only scraping, you know, just a very few people as a percentage of the population as a whole that go to some kind of an organized worship service.
Yes, and I think as these organized worship services, as you get older and less mobile, you're not getting out.
Mm-hmm.
So you watch whatever's on
Online.
TV, and so you're losing a connection, and then oftentimes kids don't belong because they're busy with all their sports on Sundays. And I happen to be Catholic. I still go to church, which just in and of itself is odd.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm one of these. I'm officially old because I go to the Saturday evening service.
Okay.
That's what happens.
Yeah,
is
yeah.
the
It does
Saturday evening. So Sunday mornings, I teasingly say, I said I'm just going to be a secular guy and sleep in, have coffee, and watch TV. And so I pretend I'm secular.
Right.
But a lot of people have a lot of stuff going on, and you look at all the stores. Like I say, I'm 64. I remember on Sundays, Southdale Center, in its early founding, they used to have automobile races around the parking lot because there was no shopping on Sundays.
In North Dakota, we didn't have stores open on Sunday.
Yes.
So they would trade on which pharmacy would be open, between the two in town. And what's the most popular day now for funerals, or is there a?
Oh boy, it's Saturday.
Okay, so
And I want to preface it
okay,
because people are just as busy on Saturday, or more so than they are any other day of the week. I mean, I can ask you, what are you doing Saturday? I go, da-da-da-da.
Right.
But people think, well, everybody's off, so therefore more people will come.
Yeah.
That's not true. Less people don't come, but more people don't come. If it's important, people will come. So funeral home, cemetery, burial vault companies, they all charge extra for Saturday funerals because, like everyone else,
demand is up.
Well, demand's up, and I want to give my help time off.
Right.
Because we're already working every day.
Sure.
And weekends used to be slower. But so Friday is a close second. And no, not everybody dies on Sunday because that's when all the obituaries are.
Yeah.
So.
Right. So, for example, our church used to have, they send out an email, who can help, with the lunch, and that kind of thing. And it was always, it seemed like, on a Friday. And I was like, I could never help out on a Friday. And now they have tried to move them mostly to Thursdays. And so now I'm, the church funeral lady. Serving the coffee and whatnot, but it is what it is. And so I was thinking that maybe Thursdays, just because the church had said they try to do them on Thursdays because of the staff, right, to give people time off. And people will take time off work to go to a funeral, right? Because I mean, we're self-employed, so that doesn't apply to us. But most people, they get time off for funerals, right?
Yes, and this is where I put my undertaker hat on, funeral director hat on, and you can advise people, not that they always listen, but there's a certain importance of that evening visitation. And an evening visitation, you don't even have to have remains there, whether it's in a casket or cremated remains, but it's a chance to come to our facility or any facility and come and go.
And I still like that, and maybe that's just me and my traditional.
To quote my friend Stephanie Stolt, if you have a visitation 1 hour prior to the church service, and you have 100 people are going to come. Well, if everybody lined up, how much time do you have to visit each one of those people?
Right.
That's assuming they all come in order. But no, they all come 20 minutes before.
Exactly.
And then one person will dominate 20 minutes catching up on...
I'm raising my hand for the people. Okay, yeah,
right.
that'd be me.
Well,
all right.
It's true.
Well, it is true.
They filibuster away, and I get it. But people don't understand it. Oh, I just don't want to do it 2 days.
So
okay.
are we? So is that still common?
It's common, but less common.
Oh, that's too bad.
We all talk about our passing in today's terms, but in reality, have you been sick for 3 years?
Yeah.
And have you gone into assisted living? You lost your driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you live long enough, nobody will be there.
No way
But-
either, because they're either dead or forgot about
Yeah,
you.
well, God bless my father, but he always said, if you want a big funeral, die young.
Yeah.
Well, there is that.
I want to talk about the value and importance of the ceremony itself, and that anytime there's a crisis, people gather,
Right.
to gain support from one another. And in this situation, you're in the middle of all of that. And so there's a connection that happens rather quickly, I would imagine, between you and the family. How strong is that connection, and is it fleeting? I mean, is once the people are in the ground or in the wherever they're going to go, is that end, or is there a continuity there sometimes that lasts longer? I'm just about your connection with the family that comes in. I'm interested from a personal standpoint, just your connection. We'll pick it up when we come back after the break, but I'm curious about how you maintain, or if you do maintain, that relationship with the family after the service.
Perfect.
All right, this is Our Healthy Homes. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. This is Our Healthy Homes, ourhealthyhomes.com. We're with Dan McGraw of Guild Brothers, and we're talking about end-of-life services and just kind of a general conversation about how all of that works. When we went out to break last time, I asked the question, maybe a little bit clumsily, but I wanted to know what kind of a personal connection that gets formed with the family, because you're talking about some of the most intimate, personal details of a family's life, how they want their loved one to be taken care of at the end or following whatever family instructions they have, and that by its nature will form a connection with you that is different than the teller at the bank. So what I'm curious about is, does that last after the burial service, or are you just kind of on to the next one now? Next.
Yes, we would like it to last. However, oftentimes you got to be aware and present.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
What does this guy want? Is he trying to sell more goods and services?
Yeah.
Or oftentimes, aftercare is a word that we use in our funeral home, where it may not be the actual funeral director. It could be a representative from the company that will make a follow-up call with the next of kin, which could oftentimes, if there's children,
Mm-hmm.
it's the executor of the estate or spouse, and to check in with them and see, do you need help with, there's a whole checklist of things. Of course, I can't remember it now,
Mhm.
but when you pass,
Mm-hmm.
about whether today, emails, passwords, bank accounts, credit cards, and safe deposit box, automobiles, other property, life insurance, it can be overwhelming, and people just freeze and not flight, so they don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Where other people are taskmasters and they'll like to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times we're there if they need help, and you approach it cautiously. Could be, well, gee, where's the marker for Mom's grave?
Right.
Oh, well, they're about a year out.
Mm-hmm.
It can take a while. And what about prearrangements for themselves? It catches them at a point where, okay, now we had the party and parade, but now it's time for you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want your burden with the children to think, well, they had a parade for Dad or Mom, so now we're going to have one for Dad. Dad says, no, it's
I
the
don't want one.
barbecue.
Right, it's the barbecue.
So it's one thing talking about it, but
Mhm.
it's another thing actually putting it down on paper.
You better email me that checklist.
And it is, it is a burden when you go through, because if there's no arrangements made, then you've got family members who are grieving, trying to make decisions about things that they may regret later or second guess themselves on. I have a personal question for you with regard to that, because we had a gal on the show, Conversations with Kelly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we talked about grief.
Mm-hmm.
And in your line of work, you are surrounded with grief. and sometimes sometimes maybe they're glad, but most of the time they're not. Most of the time they're grieving. How do you personally handle that? I mean, it'd be hard not to have that just kind of overwhelm you, it seems.
There was a professor at the university when I was in mortuary school, Dr. John Brantner, and his quote, and it sounds just awful: funeral directors are good because we don't care. And we all, as students, go, whoa, what do you mean you don't care? He says, well, you want them to be cared for, but I don't have emotional connections with most of the families I serve. However, when I know the deceased, when I know the children who've lost a mother, then it gets a little cloudy because nobody likes to see their friends hurting. And then there's, fortunately, most of the people we bury are grandmas and grandpas. You know, our average age of death is in the mid to late 70s, which is good. But when you get into the
not from my perspective, it's not good.
I was waiting for something to come up over there.
Yeah, yeah, I mean,
I wasn't going to say it, honey.
I'm looking over the hill and I can see the
well, my dad
hearse.
always said, you know, who wants to live to be 100?
I do.
I do.
The one who's 99.
Yeah.
Right, yes.
But and a serious vein is when you take care of a child that dies, particularly at play. You know, tragic accident.
Yes,
and that just wipes out.
Everybody.
I don't care if you don't know any of the parents, grandparents, friends, or anything. As a funeral director, that wipes you out.
It's kind of like, you know, when we first started taking Brisket, the therapy dog, to the kids' hospice, people would say, oh, my word, how are you going to do that? Because I'm the biggest crybaby there is.
Yes.
You know, cry at the cot commercial, you know, all the stuff. And I asked them, I said, am I going to get hard to this? And they said, no, you will never get hard to it. You will learn to take your emotions and cry outside of it, or you know, through the therapy dog, you will be so focused on her and what she's doing, you know, that you will learn to hold your emotions until you get out in the car, or you know, whatever it is. And there was a lot of truth to that. It certainly.
I can see what you're saying, because it's no different than well, it is different, but similar to, let's say, for us, the reason that people hire a real estate agent to transact is not to do the mechanical stuff out there. It's part of it is because they are so attached to their homes many times, where they've raised their families and stuff like that. They become so attached to it that they lose perspective in the valuations and the things that need to be done to prepare for sale, and the fact that someone else may, you know, come into it, and so forth. And then so then we can come in detached because we have no vested emotion in that particular asset. Our job is to liquidate the asset. Similarly, your job is to be detached, to be professional, so that you can carry out your tasks appropriately and professionally, and have the best experience and best outcome for that family under those circumstances. You know, we have a couple areas that we specialize in. One is divorce and one is probate. So we deal a lot with wills and probate. And divorce, it's always the same. It's like, you know, destruction going on.
Right.
And it's, you can maintain your integrity, and not your integrity, but your detachment for so long until you see kids being impacted by it and all that. And then it does kind of tug at your heartstrings a little bit, and you want to make sure you almost become personally invested in the outcome to make sure that they get taken care of appropriately. It's different to me, though, than being surrounded by this overbearing grief that just I can't imagine is just as heavy on you. And maybe I'm dwelling too much on it, but it's like,
no, because it's real.
You know, bless you for it.
And I, as a funeral director, unfortunately or fortunately, it took me many years. I was licensed as a mortician in 1981, and it was in 2019 that my mother passed. And prior to that, you know, there was grandma and great grandma in early 80s, and
lived a great life.
Yeah, both close to 100. But now mom dies.
Mm-hmm.
That was a little different.
Mm-hmm.
That, even though she had dementia and goes into the nursing home, okay, mom, it's okay, you can go home and reunite with your parents.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 4.5 years later, she does, and it was still a gut punch.
Yeah.
So, as happy as I was for mom, it was a void in my life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And even though she had really who she was a completely different person, but it was still her shell. So it was good for me to learn and see. Unfortunately, it took me a long time in my funeral service career to do that.
So my dad in 19 died of a root canal, so it was really unexpected. And both my dad and his wife had donated their bodies to science. So the bodies had to get from Wapaton, North Dakota to Grand Forks within a certain amount of time. And I'm the executor, I'm the personal rep, and they just gave me the papers. Like, here, you're going to need these when we go. Well, I didn't look at them, right? So as a caution, as a warning, as I invite you to whoever that person is, look at those papers, because had I known that my dad chose to have the ashes
Mm-hmm.
be the property of UND, I would have asked that to be
Said
changed
something.
when he was alive.
Right. Right.
Because now those ashes are
Gone.
UND's.
Can't get them back.
Yes, and a lot of people talk about what they want, never really involve their children or have a deep, serious conversation, because once you start talking about it, you're going to live forever.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you got to pause. What is that feeling really
Right.
like?
Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about that when we come back. I want to talk about planning ahead and taking a look at that and kind of what the steps would be for someone to go through that process. And who would they talk to? Is it you, or is it family, or how does that conversation go? This is Our Healthy Homes. We're right back after these messages. Hey, welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. This is Our Healthy Homes, ourhealthyhomes.com. We're here in the studio with Dan McGraw from Gill Brothers. We're talking about end-of-life services. And when we went out to break, I just posed the question we were chatting about a little bit, and that's planning ahead and how important it is just to do that. And sometimes that conversation comes up at mom or dad's funeral, when all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, they're gone now, and
Whoops.
I can see the light at the end of the tunnel down there myself. Maybe I better make some arrangements. How has that changed over the years? I mean, do we have the old family plots anymore where people go to the family plot?
There's remnants of them, and it gets really ugly because I'm not a cemetery law expert, but prior to 1960-something, the plot went to the oldest son. After that,
Oh.
it goes to the oldest child. So you got a family of 8 plots, and that person now lives in Florida,
Sure.
Yeah.
and they're dead, and their oldest child lives somewhere else, and all we're doing is looking for someone to put their cremains on top of their own mom and dad's grave.
Mm-hmm.
But these cemeteries have to follow this law, and it gets very complicated. So there's remnants of them. There's cemeteries still sell them, but not nearly the frequency. As an example, back in 1880, our company was founded in 1889. Somewhere around 1895, my great-grandparents lost a son, so they bought a plot of 8 or 16 graves at St. Mary's Cemetery. And then their friends, the Hoys, were there, and then there's another friend there. And so they all bought their graves together because they were all friends.
Yeah.
Way
Yeah.
to go.
Yeah.
Yes. All those graves have pretty much filled up. So there's one grave left at my great-grandparents' grave. I just happen to know it because I'm
'Cause you
weird
do.
that way.
Because you're in the business.
I'm in the business.
Yeah.
I love family history.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know who I could call to get permission.
So
My great-grandparents had gone to the oldest surviving child, and who's, 4 generations.
Yeah.
And that is
down,
a hard
you know.
track to
but
follow.
at the same time, there's and we talked a little bit about it. We sit here, we talk about our own demise and what do we want, and so that's important to in 2023 that when I first got in the business, funeral planning was you come in and talk to the funeral director, and 90% of the funerals they had a visitation, they had a church funeral, and they went to the cemetery.
That's what I remember.
Yeah, that's what you did. Funeral planning, even with the church, where you choose music and scripture readings, funeral planning was you'd call up the pastor and say, yeah, Bill Johnson died. Oh, what day do they want it? Friday. Oh, yeah, 1 o'clock. Okay, we'll see you then. Burial at Hillside. Done. That was funeral planning. Oh, then you have visitation Thursday, and the guy died on Tuesday. So it was really quick. Today, people carefully plan their funerals, and as funeral directors and our pre-planners, they often guide them into situations to avoid, like you did with your father. But it's also really important to let your loved ones know what you're doing, and so they can speak up. Not just to say
before
it's
the
done.
fact. Yeah.
Not to say that it's done, but this is what we're doing. And every now and again, people will not be happy. And oftentimes it's a situation where the mom and dad pre-planned and didn't discuss it. But more often than not, we have a seminar at the funeral home talking about the value of pre-planning and prepaying the funeral and our guarantee, etc. And people come and they have all the stuff filled out. And mom and dad are now in a nursing home and they've run out of all their assets. And the kids come in and they find the folder, say, hey, we got mom's pre-planning.
Right.
Yeah, they never really went to the final step. What do you mean? Yeah, they just said they were going to think about it. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Why didn't you make them do it? Well, usually it was because the kids said don't do it.
Yeah.
So, die broke, request an expensive funeral, and see if your kids loved you.
Yeah, I mean, the thing of it is that's just exactly right. I mean, you want to take as much of that off the table as you can for them so that they don't have to worry about it. It's all taken care of. It's all planned out. They've been involved in the conversation. They know, when Sheila's from North Dakota. I'm from Winona, Minnesota. We live in the Twin Cities. Where am I? I always tell kids I want to be cremated and put in a jar, and I want to be on the mantle. And then when then you kids can fight over it after a few years of who has to take dad, and then I'll be passed around for a while. I'll be on the mantle scowling at them. But I mean, that's just kind of almost the way it is. What are the options now?
Well, that's one of our concerns is cremation is not a funeral. Cremation is
disposal of the body.
Just
it's
get
disposal
into
of the body.
It's a technical, it's a final disposition.
Yeah.
So oftentimes the buzzwords that funeral homes like to use now, or funeral directors, the death care industry, is permanent memorialization. So you go to the mantle, and then your grandkids finally get the remains, and they go to the storage locker.
Yeah.
And someone says, okay, what do we do with Grandpa's remains?
Put it in the landfill.
Well, I don't know. Well, he's from Winona. We'll go to Maplewood Cemetery or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they'll say, oh, yeah, well, it's going to be $2,000 to buy a grave, another $2,000 to mark the grave, or current values in 100 years, whatever.
Yeah.
But whatever the dollars are, and they go, I'm not buying that.
Yeah.
And then, it's like over the shoulder, and
away
you go.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had people bring cremation urns in that they've bought at garage sales. And I turn them upside down, and oh my gosh, the last few particles of
grandma's in there.
They didn't knock.
They didn't tap it.
No,
they
rinse
didn't
it
clean
out.
it out. They didn't clean it out.
It's so. This is the importance of, okay, yes, I'm going to be cremated, but what do you want done with your ashes?
Yes.
Don't leave it to your kids. You know,
Well, they're going to argue anyway.
well, they're going to argue.
They're going to
but
argue about
say,
it.
okay, I want to be scattered, but okay, you know, a tablespoon is really a good amount to scatter. But when you got a, 10 to 14 pound urn of remains, that becomes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, just take them to the lake.
Yep.
I've had people tell me their mom was scattered at what now is a Kmart parking lot.
Yeah.
I've had people scatter them, at the end of their dock, and then nobody wants to swim there. My neighbor tells me the story was that someone dropped cremains off at their dock, and they sank to the bottom of the lake 2 feet, and you could see the mound there for 2 years. Finally, some neighbor came over with this boat and stirred it all up, and you don't know. There's no real laws about scattering cremains in public areas. Private properties, it's illegal unless you get the permission. But I recommend a permanent spot. But some people...
And that's like a locker somewhere or like
a cemetery. It could be a mausoleum or, a niche is the mausoleum for cremains.
Mm-hmm. Just a little locker to put it in and have it be there.
But there's a lot of options today, and a lot of it comes down to money.
Mm-hmm.
Goes back to, again, the importance of pre-planning and oftentimes putting the money aside so your children can fulfill those wishes.
Yeah, or pay in advance, because then you freeze the cost. That's the best way to do it.
That's true. We do
know,
guarantee
putting
it.
money aside, and then 10
You
years
better
from
do
now
that,
it costs
big
twice
talker.
as much. Any final thoughts that you want to share? Why don't you give your? I know that give your. How would someone get a hold of you if they got questions?
The easiest way to get a hold of me would be to email me or call me. I'm old. I still like phone calls.
Okay.
So I do too.
Our family business is Gill Brothers, www.gillbrothers.com. Yes, my last name's McGraw. My mother was a Gill, a licensed funeral director.
Okay.
Her father was a licensed funeral director. And his father was a licensed funeral director. Great-grandma Gill was a licensed embalmer.
No brothers?
John and Bert Gill were the
brothers?
MJ Gill, I went backwards.
Okay.
MJ Gill Undertaking, MJ Gill and Sons.
Okay.
The Sons had a fight, and they changed the name to Gill Brothers.
Okay.
And then the one brother died, went to my grandfather.
Okay.
My son Joe's fifth generation. Very excited to have him on.
I bet.
Went to St. John's, spent 4 years in the Army, and now graduated mortuary school.
How long is mortuary school?
Here in our state, they require you graduate from an accredited mortuary school and have a college degree. So it's basically 4 years.
Okay.
And pass the national board, state board.
Gill Brothers been around for 100 years, right?
100 plus, 1889, 135.
Long time. So I think they know what they're doing. Give them call them and get some pre-planning done. I encourage you to do it. This is Our Healthy Homes, ourhealthyhomes.com, and we'll be back next week.
But when he calls me sugar, I love that man with all my might. Sugar in the morning, sugar in the afternoon. Sugar after dinner, sugar in every room. He says I'm sweet as I can be. When he calls me that name, it does things to me. I tell him, honey, you can call me sugar.